The rain did not fall so much as it was thrown against the earth. It was the spring of 1847 in the high valley of Pine Ridge, and the sky had been a bruised purple for 2 days. Inside the rough-hewn cabin that served as the schoolhouse for the ranch, Emma Rose wiped the last slate clean. Her movements were careful, quiet. She had learned to move without making a sound, to take up as little space as possible. It was a skill she had mastered over the past 6 months, ever since the incident in Hartford. Back there, she had been Miss Emmeline Rose, a teacher at a fine school for young ladies. Then a lie, started by a jealous colleague and fed by gossip, had spread like sickness. She was accused of stealing, of having a low character. No proof was needed, only whispers. Her reputation, her position, her future, all gone in a few cruel weeks. The letter from Pine Ridge Ranch, asking for someone to teach the settlers and ranch hands' children, had been a lifeline, a place to hide, a place to be forgotten. She wrapped her shawl tight around her shoulders. It was thin and offered little warmth, much like the smiles the women in the settlement gave her, polite but distant. They had heard, she was sure. News traveled, even here. Across the yard, in the main ranch house, light glowed from the windows. The sound of a fiddle and laughter spilled out, muffled by the rain. They were celebrating a wedding. Emma turned her back to it. Her room was in the small loft above the schoolhouse. Solitude was her companion, and she had grown used to its heavy silence. 5 miles up the mountain, where the pines grew thick and the air bit cold even in spring, Ezra Hawthorne banked the fire in his stone fireplace. The cabin was sturdy, built by his own hands over 20 years ago. It was full of shadows, and most of them looked like her. His wife, Cora, lost to a fever 7 winters past. She had been sunshine and song, a woman who could make flowers grow from rock and laughter echo in these silent woods. When she died, something in Ezra had died too. The townsfolk below called him Bear, not just for his size and strength, but for the way he had retreated into himself, living alone with his grief like an animal in a cave. He came down only to trade furs for supplies, his words few, his eyes telling everyone to stay away. His heart, he believed, was buried beside Cora on the little hill behind the cabin. Tonight, the storm worried him. It was a bad one, coming down from the north. He thought of the new teacher at the ranch. He'd seen her once, a pale slip of a thing hanging laundry, her face looking like a lost ghost's. He'd heard the whispers, too, some trouble back east. He shook his head, scowling at the fire. None of his business. The world of people and their troubles was a distant country to him now. But as the wind howled like a living thing, a memory surfaced. Cora's voice, soft and firm. "Ezra, we are put here to be kind, even when it hurts, especially then." He cursed under his breath. With a grunt, he pulled on his heavy oilskin coat, took a lantern, and headed out into the screaming night.
Emma jumped at the thunderous knock on the schoolhouse door. It was near midnight. Who would be out in this? She crept down the ladder, her heart pounding. She opened the door a crack, and the storm rushed in. Framed in the darkness was a giant of a man, water streaming from his broad-brimmed hat and dark beard. His shoulders seemed to fill the doorway. She took a step back, fear tightening her throat. "Storm's gonna break the ridge," he said, his voice a low rumble, deeper than the thunder. "This shack'll flood. Creek's rising fast." Emma just stared. He saw the fear in her eyes, and his own gaze dropped. "Name's Hawthorne. Ezra. I have a place, up the mountain, safer. You can come or stay, your choice." He turned, as if to leave her to decide. It was the lack of pressure, the simple statement of fact that made her act. She grabbed her small carpet bag, the one that held all she owned, and pulled her shawl over her head. "I'll come." The journey was a blur of terror and cold. He led the way, his lantern a tiny, swaying star in the blackness. He did not offer his arm, but he walked slowly, checking that she was behind him. The path was steep and slick. Once her foot slipped on the muddy track. A strong, steady hand shot out and caught her elbow, righting her before she could fall. The grip was firm, impersonal, and was gone as soon as she was stable. Finally, they reached his cabin. It was dark and solid against the wind. Inside, it was neat but bare. A table, 2 chairs, a bed in the corner, shelves with simple supplies. There were no pictures, no trinkets, but on the mantel above the fire, clean and carefully placed, was a single smooth river stone and a dried sprig of lavender. "You can have the bed," he said, not looking at her. "I'll take the floor by the fire." "I can't take your bed," she protested, her teeth chattering. "You can and you will," he said, in a tone that allowed no argument. He tossed a heavy wool cloth to her and turned to stoke the fire. That first night, they barely spoke another word. Emma lay in the strange bed, listening to the roar of the storm and the quiet breaths of the man by the hearth. She felt a strange, fragile safety. He had asked for nothing, not even her name. Emma awoke to sunlight and silence. The storm had passed. She found Ezra outside, chopping wood with a steady, powerful rhythm. He nodded when he saw her. "I should get back," she said. "Path'll be mud, dangerous. Wait till afternoon sun dries it some." He made coffee, thick and strong, and fried some salt pork. They ate at the small table, the space between them vast with quiet. "Thank you," Emma said softly, "for last night." He gave a single nod. "Needed doing." "I'm Emma Rose." "I know." Of course he did. The whole valley knew the story of the disgraced teacher. Shame warmed her cheeks. She stood to wash the plates. "Don't hold with town gossip," he said suddenly, his back to her as he looked out the window. "Heard plenty. Most of it's useless." The simple words were like a small stone dropped into the still pond of her loneliness. They didn't forgive or forget, but they refused to judge. It was more kindness than she'd had in months. When the sun was higher, he walked her back down to the ranch. At the edge of the clearing, he stopped. "If the creek rises again, the path to my place is on the north side of the big boulder, higher ground." Then he was gone, disappearing back into the trees without a goodbye. Life at the ranch resumed, but something had shifted. The memory of the quiet cabin, the silent man who asked no questions, stayed with her. A few days later, she baked an extra loaf of bread. After school, she wrapped it in cloth and walked up the mountain path. He was there, repairing a fence. He watched her approach, saying nothing. "I brought you some bread, to thank you." She held it out. He took it, his rough fingers brushing hers. "You didn't need to." "I wanted to." He looked at the bread, then at her. "Stay for supper. Got a stew." And so it began, not with declarations, but with shared meals, not with long talks, but with comfortable silence. Emma would come up after teaching, sometimes bringing a book. He would listen while carving wood or mending tools as she read aloud. He began to tell her things, in his short way, about the tracks of animals, which plants were good to eat, which would make you sick, how to read the weather in the clouds. She, in turn, began to speak of Hartford, not the scandal at first, but the good things, her love of books, her students who learned to write their names, the smell of chalk and ink. One evening, sitting by the fire, as the first summer stars appeared, she told him the truth, the lie, the shame, the feeling of being thrown away. He listened, his face hard in the firelight. When she finished, tears she had long held back finally falling, he said, "People down there, they like simple stories, a good person or a bad one. The truth is usually somewhere in the middle, and that's too messy for them." He spoke not just of her, she realized, but of himself. The town had a story for him, too, the wild, grieving mountain man.
As summer turned to the blazing gold of autumn, Emma found herself living in two worlds. The ranch, where she was still the polite, distant Miss Rose, and the mountain, where she was simply Emma. Ezra began to teach her the land. He showed her how to fish in the clear, cold stream, how to identify edible mushrooms, how to follow the deer trails. One day, they found a young fox with an injured leg caught in a trap meant for bigger game. Emma knelt, her heart hurting for the little creature. Without a word, Ezra worked carefully to free it. He made a splint from twigs and strips of cloth, his big hands surprisingly gentle. They left it water and food in a sheltered spot. "Will it live?" Emma asked. "Hard to say," he replied, "but every creature deserves a chance to try." She looked at him then, really looked, at the sadness etched around his eyes and the kindness that still lived beneath it. She saw not a bear, but Ezra, a man who had loved deeply and lost completely. He felt her gaze and met it. For a long moment they just looked at each other, and something silent and important passed between them in the quiet of the woods. The air felt different, charged like before a lightning strike, but warm. He broke the look first, clearing his throat. "Best get back." The change happened slowly, like ice melting in spring. One afternoon, Ezra came down to the schoolhouse. The children were gone. He stood awkwardly in the doorway. "Need some supplies in town tomorrow. Wagon ride is long, quiet. Could use the company." It was an invitation. The next day, sitting beside him on the wagon seat as it rolled toward the distant cluster of buildings, Emma felt a new kind of nervousness. In town, people stared. They saw the grim mountain man and the disgraced teacher together, and the whispers started like rustling leaves. At the general store, Mrs. Hobbs, the owner's wife, gave Emma a cold look and spoke loudly to another woman. "Some folks have no shame parading around. Guess birds of a feather really do flock together." Emma froze, the old humiliation washing over her like icy water. But before she could shrink away, Ezra stepped forward. He placed the sack of flour on the counter with a solid thump. "Miss Rose is the schoolteacher for Pine Ridge. She is a learned woman. Your words are not needed." He paid for the supplies, took Emma's elbow gently, and led her out. His hand was a steady anchor. He had not shouted, not threatened. He had simply stated a fact and removed her from the ugliness. In that simple act, he had defended her dignity more powerfully than anyone ever had. On the ride home, as the sunset painted the sky, Emma's hand rested on the seat between them. After a few miles, his own large hand settled over hers. It was warm and rough. Winter came early to the high valley. The first snow fell, soft and thick, covering the world in a clean blanket. Emma was spending more and more time at the cabin. She had started sewing curtains for the windows, adding a touch of color. One evening, she noticed the river stone and lavender on the mantel were dusty. She carefully picked them up to clean. Ezra came in from stacking wood and saw her. He went very still. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, setting them down. "I was just dusting." "It's all right," he said, his voice thick. He walked over and picked up the stone. "Cora found this, the day we decided to build here. Said it was the heart of the mountain." He touched the lavender. She loved the smell. Emma's eyes filled with tears, not from jealousy, but from a deep understanding of his love and his loss. She must have been wonderful. She was. He looked from the objects to Emma's face. "For a long time, keeping these clean was all I could do. It was like keeping her alive." He paused, struggling with the words. "But you dust the whole room. You make the stew taste different. You make the silence less loud. I thought my heart was gone, Emma. I think
I think it was just frozen, and you've been slowly warming it back to life." It was the most he had ever said at once. Emma reached out and took his hand. "You did the same for me, Ezra. You saw me when everyone else saw a story. You gave me a place where I wasn't broken." He cupped her face in his hands, his touch infinitely tender. "You're not broken. You're the strongest person I know." And then, in the quiet of the cabin, with the snow falling outside, he kissed her. It was a kiss full of 7 years of silence and grief, and the first fragile hope of a new beginning. It was a promise. Their love was not a wild, shouting thing. It was built in shared sunrises over the ridge, in him learning to smile again, a slow, precious thing, and in her laughter finally returning, bright and clear. It was in the way he started leaving wildflowers on her school desk, and how she mended his shirts without being asked. One spring morning, a year after the storm, they walked up to the hill behind the cabin. Cora's grave was there, simple and peaceful. Ezra held Emma's hand tightly. "I will always love her," he said, his eyes on the stone. "I know," Emma said, "and I would never want you to stop. Her love is part of you. It's part of what makes you the man I love." He turned to her, his eyes shining. "My heart has grown, Emma. It has made room for her memory and for you, right here beside it." He knelt, not on one knee, but both, in a gesture of deep respect and love. "Will you build this life with me? Not forgetting the past, but carrying it forward, together." Emma knelt with him in the soft grass, among the wildflowers. "Yes, Ezra, with all my heart." They were married a week later in a small ceremony at the ranch, with the children from the schoolhouse and a few of the ranch hands who had come to respect them both. As they left the party to walk back up to their mountain, the settlers watched them go, the woman who had been rejected and the man who had hidden from the world, their hands clasped tightly, walking into a future they had bravely chosen to face together. Love had not come by forgetting the past. It had come by finding in another wounded soul the courage to remember, to heal, and to begin again. And on the mantel of the cabin, the smooth river stone and the sprig of lavender now sat beside a small, perfect pine cone that Emma had found on their walk that first day of spring, a symbol of a heart that had learned, against all odds, to beat